few days.
Marquise Harris Dawson, good morning.
Good morning, Dominique, and good morning to the KBLA family.
Councilmember Heather Hutt, good morning.
Good morning, Dominique.
I am pleased to welcome the new president of the LA City Council, Paul Kikoy. Mr. President, how are you, sir?
Good morning, Tavis. I'm well. Thank you very much.
Holding all politicians accountable to you. We're unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580.
Try to keep it coming. Things ain't always smooth, but I'll be alright as long as I can find the groove. Yes, I will. Yeah. Somehow I know that I can make it. You seem to like my style. All right. Don't you worry, I'm gonna be around a while.
Live from the Merck Park, USA, I'm Tavis Smiley. You're listening to KBLA Talk 1580. So glad to see you and me back in stride again. Our phone number, 1-800-920-1580, 1-800-920-1580. All of our socials can be found at KBLA 1580. That's Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube, everything at KBLA 1580. Let me also invite you to download our app at KBLA 1580. Download the app and take us with you anywhere in the world and listen to us in real time, but only by downloading our app right now at KBLA 1580. Should you miss us any day in real time, check out the podcast of this program by going to the app, the website, Anchor, Spotify, Apple, so many places to get the podcast of this program and listen at your leisure. Should you miss us any day in real time, but I am delighted to have you along live with us today for the next 3 hours. You can also watch the live stream of this program by tapping the KBLA TV icon on our app or by going to our YouTube channel. Let me also invite you to follow me on Facebook and Instagram at The Real Tavis Smiley and get Twitter updates at Tavis Smiley. Another great show on tap for you today. In our second hour, over the Thanksgiving holiday weekend, President Joe Biden said that he and his family were not having any conversations about a potential 2024 presidential run while they were vacationing in Nantucket, Massachusetts. Following the midterm elections, President Biden, as you recall, said he intends to run for re-election, but added that he will make a final decision by early next year. Also over the weekend, California Governor Gavin Newsom said he does not plan to run for president in 2024, even if President Biden chooses not to run. That comment from Governor Newsom matters because he is one of the names on the oft-discussed list of potential Democratic candidates come 2024. So take one name off the list of those who may run against President Biden if he chooses to run again, or, as Governor Newsom said, he ain't running, period. We shall see if he keeps that promise. If President Biden says he will not get in the race, we shall see, as I said. President Biden's approval rating sits right at about 39% at the moment, and multiple polls indicate that Democrats have an appetite for a different candidate in the next presidential election. Today, then, a conversation about the modern presidency, 6 debates that define the institution, including how powerful is the American presidency these days? What's more important in an American president, character or competence? Is presidential success a matter of skill or opportunity? Will future presidents turn away from checks and balances in favor of illiberal democracy? So many questions. A conversation with LMU political science professor and author Michael Genovese. In our third hour, intelligence isn't enough. A Black Professional's Guide to Thriving in the Workplace. Carice Anderson, a leading director in leadership and manager development for major companies like Google, J.P. Morgan Chase, Bloomberg, and others, joins us in hour 3 for a candid conversation about why Black professionals cannot rely on their education and intellect alone to be successful in the workplace. Look forward to that conversation with Carice once we get into our 3. But in this first hour today, let's talk politics with national affairs correspondent for The Nation magazine and CNN political contributor Joan Walsh. Her brilliant and illuminating best-selling book of 2012, What's the Matter with White People? Finding Our Way in the Next America, is even more relevant right about now in 2022. I am pleased to welcome Joan Walsh to this program. Joan, it's been far too long. How are you today?
Tavis, I'm great. It has been far too long. It's wonderful to be back with you.
It's good to have you back and hear your voice again on radio and on this station, KBLA. So thank you for the time. Glad we got an hour. A whole lot to unpack this day. I had stuff already on my mind over the weekend. Then you wake up this morning and you see what's happening in China. Let's start there. We'll start international and work our way back stateside. I've been to China many times. I don't know if you have, but I've been there many times. And one of the things that strikes you when you go to China is that there are cameras everywhere. I mean, literally everywhere you look, you are on camera in the Republic of China. I say that because when Chinese people then decide to protest, when they've had so much and they can't take it anymore, and they decide to protest, they're really putting their lives on the line because the cameras, again, are everywhere watching your every move. So when you see these kinds of eruptions, this kind of protest in China, it makes a huge statement to me. How are you reading the protest in the streets of China that the government is trying to crack down on now?
Well, I haven't been to China, unfortunately, but from a distance, I can certainly say, though it's about the very draconian COVID lockdowns that they live under regularly, because that's the way the government deals with the pandemic. It's about more than that, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
It's about being driven to the breaking point by, injustice, scarcity, corruption, and everything else. There was a big apartment fire, and people are protesting the living conditions that led to that. It's really one thing to be locked down in a lovely apartment like I was, but it's very different when you're in unsafe conditions and grim conditions. So, it's about a lot more. It's incredibly brave, and, we'll see where it goes and whether they can sustain it. Yep. I certainly hope so.
No, it is incredibly brave, and that was the point I was trying to make earlier by suggesting that, again, when you protest here, and let me be clear, we crack down on protest here too, unless you're white and unless you're white and you're male and you storm the Capitol on January the 6th. Other than that, we crack down on protest even here. Ask those who are participants in Black Lives Matter protests. You'll hear stories about the ways our government pushes back against protest, even in the U.S. of A. But in China, it's a very, very different thing, as you all know. And so to Joan's point, it is, in fact, very brave. I guess the question is, before I move on, is what you think this does, or how this might infuse the conversation about democracy, because that's what they want. They want to live in a democratic state. Many of them do. Most of them, I suspect, do. And they've had enough of this. But it does, again, raise the conversation, not that we are perfect, but it raises conversations about human rights violations. It raises conversations about democracy and whether or not it can take hold in a place like China. Your thoughts, Joan?
Well, I think it's a really tough situation for Joe Biden. Just after he took some steps to cool down tensions and try to make China a partner on a lot of issues, climate change, energy, and as well as the war in Ukraine. So, I have questions about how hard he will push back on what he's seeing. If it reaches some kind of, breaking point, I can't even see that. I don't have the imagination to believe that people will survive the kinds of crackdowns that they impose there, Tavis. But if it does, that might change certainly the moral equation, if not the geopolitical equation.
Yeah, they are cracking down. Turn on your television, turn on your radio, everywhere you look and turn these days. It is the trending international story right now. They are cracking down literally on protests in the streets of China. That has a huge impact for our relations with China. As you heard Joan say a moment ago, we'll see what President Biden does. He's been trying to tamp down and cool down relations with China after the outrageous comments by Donald Trump during his presidency about China. So President Biden's been trying to cool that down, but now that they're cracking down on protesters, exercising their right to be heard. It puts the president in a difficult spot, puts our country in a difficult situation. We will see what happens in the next hours, in the coming days. But again, they are cracking down as we speak on people taking to the streets, protesting in China. I don't care where you are in the world. You can't hold people back forever. You can't hold them back. You can't hold them down forever. Eventually, that comes out in some way, shape, or form. And we see now the Chinese people raising up and trying to express themselves. Reminds me of Tiananmen Square. For those who've been around long enough, you recall Tiananmen Square and those tanks that rolled down the street and those Chinese students who laid their bodies down in the streets right in front of those tanks and dared those tanks to run over them. Talk about brave. And so we're seeing a bit more of that today in the Republic of China. Let's move from international stories to domestic stories. When we come forward with our guest, Joan Walsh, we'll go straight to Georgia. The Georgia Supreme Court, as you probably heard over the weekend, allowed early voting to begin. So on Saturday, they started going to the polls in Georgia in that race that everybody's talking about and watching between Raphael Warnock and Herschel Walker for the U.S. Senate. We'll talk to Joan about that and a great deal more as we move through this first hour of Tavis Smiley on KBLA Talk 1580.
Be sure to like and follow Tavis Smiley at The Real Tavis Smiley and get Twitter updates at Tavis Smiley. The conversation continues when we come forward.
Life is uncertain. It's okay to feel stressed, anxious, worried, or frustrated. It's normal. With CalHope's free and secure mental health resources, it's easy to get the help you and your loved ones need when you need it the most. Call our warm line at 833-317-4673 or live chat at calhope.org today.
It's pro time because at Lowe's, it's Provember. Save big with inventory you can count on, like Flex products or DeWalt power tools starting at just $99. Plus, Lowe's MVPs members earn up to 3 times bonus points per dollar on select items. Save all Provember long. Bonus points calculated before taxes and fees after applicable discounts, if any. MVP's Pro Rewards Program terms and restrictions apply. See Lowe's.com/L/Pro Loyalty terms. Subject to change. Prices valid from 10/17/22 to 2/3/23 or until supplies last.
KBLA Talk 1580.
The thrill of victory. The thrill of victory. Thrill of victory. Yeah.
KBLA Talk 1580 wishes to congratulate Mayor-elect Karen Bass on her historic win as the first woman and only second African-American to serve as chief executive of the city of Los Angeles.
Congratulations, Mayor-elect Bass, and welcome back to Unapologetically Progressive KBLA Talk 1580.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for having me on the show. And this is my very first interview, and I am proud that it's here.
We are proud to have you here. What do you want to say to the listeners of KBLA Talk 1580?
I want to say thank you from just, I'm just full of the love that I felt every place I went in the community. And I just want the listeners to know that I promise you I won't disappoint you. I will be accessible. I will never forget where I'm from, and understand that is my primary motivation.
Congratulations, Mayor-elect Karen Bass, holding all leaders accountable to you.
No matter who you voted for, no matter who you are or where you live, I will be a mayor for you.
We're KBLA Talk 1580. Talk 1580. Talk 1580. And we don't black down. We've got a lot to talk about.
Smooth skin begins with hydrating ingredients. Olay Hyaluronic Body Lotion nourishes your skin with all-day hydration for deeply moisturized results that give you confidence like buttery soft shoulders like and visibly smooth skin like. Quench your skin with nourishing moisture from Olay Hyaluronic Body Lotion. Try Olay Hyaluronic Body Wash too and get skin your face will envy.
Interrogating your assumptions and expanding your inventory of ideas. Let's get back to Tavis Smiley on KBLA Talk 1580.
Our guest in this hour is National Affairs Correspondent for The Nation magazine and CNN political contributor Joan Walsh. Pleased to have her in this first hour. Joan, let's go straight to Georgia. Supreme Court over the weekend, as you know, allowed early voting post the Thanksgiving holiday. A big debate in the state of Georgia. I'm not sure why it should have been, but it was. And thankfully for voters, I think, in that state, the Supreme Court there made the right decision to allow early voting to begin. Let me start by asking what you make of the debate that they had about early voting in Georgia, and then we'll go into the campaign itself.
Well, it's a shameful debate, Tavis, because it was clear that the Secretary of State had the authority to say Saturday voting was okay. And the reason he didn't was that it came after what was basically the Robert E. Lee holiday. They renamed it in 2015. They renamed it a state holiday. They took out the Confederate leader's name. But everybody knows what it means. So it was so anti-democracy and racist to rule that way in the first place. It was unnecessary because, not to bore everyone, but the language of the law does not make any reference to runoffs. So it doesn't necessarily apply to runoffs. Brad Raffensperger had so much latitude to say, yes, let's go ahead with early voting. And then when the Supreme Court ruled in favor of basically the Democrats in the situation, the RNC, the Republican, Mitch McConnell's group, several Republican groups appealed it. Luckily, they were unsuccessful. But what does that mean? They are so blatantly trying to, defend the sanctity of the Robert E. Lee holiday. I'm not going to call it anything else. And B, disenfranchise black voters. That would mean that there would be no Saturday voting at all. They already truncated the runoff period. So it's a real tough. It's a tough sprint for both sides. But Democrats sometimes have a harder time getting to the polls. But Saturday voting made a huge difference. They had incredible turnout on Saturday. It was just really wonderful to see that people stood up and took advantage of what was their right. There were unfortunately, but people chose to stand in them. There were long lines in the Atlanta suburbs and in Atlanta. But people stayed in line and they voted. And, that's just a great sign for democracy, but also I think a great sign for Senator Warnock.
Yeah. I am not naive in saying this, but let me say it anyway. Every time I see a story like this, Joan, and I'm curious to get your take on it. Let me tell you my take first. Every time I see a story like this, it actually tickles me because from time to time you have the GOP offering lip service to black voters, Trump being chief among them of late, but offering lip service and suggesting that they are a party that's big enough to consider African American concerns, and that Democrats, black folks should get off the Democratic plantation. All the language we've heard for years, but they make these empty, bankrupt sort of appeals here and there to black voters. Donald Trump again did it a lot when he was president, and here now in Georgia, you have a black man running for the United States Senate against another black man, of course, named Raphael Warnock. But you got two black men running for the U.S. Senate. And here's an opportunity to engage and involve more people in the process. And as you said very clearly and very correctly, it's really about voter disenfranchisement, particularly and especially for African American voters in the state of Georgia, even as they have a black candidate on the ballot running for the U.S. Senate. It just never ceases to amaze me that even when they have an opportunity to make an appeal to black voters specifically, or black voters writ large, they do stupid stuff like this, where they appeal a decision to allow people to vote early. Clearly, they don't want more people involved in the process, but it's just another one of those examples that they really ain't serious about trying to appeal to black voters or anybody who's not a white male, frankly.
No, absolutely. It's so cynical. Right. If you think that Herschel Walker is the best candidate, which nobody can, I don't even think they do, and you think that he ought to appeal to the state's black voters, which he does not, we learned that in the general election in early November, then, you good faith would say, okay, let's give black voters a chance to come out on Saturday for Herschel Walker. But they know that's not going to happen. It didn't happen in November. It's not going to happen in December. It didn't happen over the weekend. We don't have, they don't sort people by party registration. So we really can't say for sure, what people's party registration was, but we can look at the precincts where turnout was high. We know the race of voters. Black people made up like 45% of those who voted on Saturday and Sunday, which is great. It usually they usually average about 30%. So, it's so transparent to people who've been watching for a long time. Yeah, we'll run this black guy. We know black voters are too smart to vote for him. So we're just still going to keep, our foot on the necks of black voters in the meantime. So, we see it. We know it.
Not that we needed any more evidence, but if you needed if you just needed one more thing to add to your list of why Republicans ain't really serious about black voters, here's another example, another item I should say to add to your list of why they really don't care about us. To quote one Kanye West from years ago, speaking of George W. Bush, he could have been speaking about the entire party. They don't care about us. And here's again more evidence of that. Let's talk now specifically about the race. Let me just ask this question very forthrightly and direct to you. Why is this race so close? To your point, everybody knows that Herschel Walker is not qualified to be a U.S. Senate candidate, much less to serve in the U.S. Senate, and yet this race is so close. To your mind, why?
I think there are a lot of reasons. I think, we can't talk about the runoff, although we have some good signs, as I've said. But I was there in November, and I saw some of the factors that contributed. For one thing, let's start with voter suppression. That bill, SB 202, a lot of people thought, hey, voting was easy. They actually increased the number of days for early voting. People took advantage of it. And early voting was at an all-time high, especially for black people. So that's the good news. But they really cracked down on the time you could request an absentee ballot, the amount of time you had to send it back, as well as they shut down hundreds of so-called drop boxes that were so popular in 2020 and 2021, so that if you forgot to mail your ballot in, or if you just didn't trust the mail, you could go to a drop box. There were plenty of them. You knew where they were. Drop off your ballots. That really wasn't an option this time around. So the absentee ballot voting plummeted while early voting went up. The other thing that I would say, and I hate to be critical of people I love, but I don't think that there was sufficient investment in the ground infrastructure. A lot of the great groups that we've followed over the years, and that I followed in 2020 and 21, as well as 2018 in the Stacey Abrams campaign, they complained of donor disinvestment in their infrastructure, basically, of community outreach, neighbor to neighbor, that was so successful, especially in 2021 in the runoff. And the big donors were giving to the big campaign organizations, including the Abrams campaign and the Warnock campaign. And, they were doing their best to set up field operations. But I think that we should have learned that over the long term, a lot of this mobilization really has to be done on the ground by people with ongoing relationships to those voters who might not have the time to turn out. They might not find the reasons to turn out. There are people for whom, inflation really is a big deal, obviously. There are also people for whom, the Biden administration hasn't done as much as it should, especially, let's say, on voting rights and other things. So, the people who can really get the message to their neighbors about, hey, I hear you. I know why you're a little disillusioned. But, first of all, here's what they did do. They put money in your pocket in all these ways. And here's what they stand for. Those people didn't have the money to do that kind of groundwork, or at least a lot of them didn't. So I heard complaints from people I really trust. I don't think they're just, malingerers or people who like to complain. They're people who really knew what they were talking about. So I'm hoping that, I know I did some reporting last week that, some donors have stepped up and people are trying to reinvest in those groups. But, the runoff period was only 4 weeks. So it's really hard to get the money out the door, even if you want to, and to hire staff and activate people, reactivate networks, even if you want to. So we're going to see how it goes. It sounds like it's better to me on the ground. I am feeling pretty optimistic, but it shouldn't be close. Yeah. And, he's a disaster as a candidate. So, we'll see. Yeah.
First of all, I hear your point about not wanting to criticize those who you love, but as I say all the time, sometimes you do have to fight with your friends. That's just the reality in life.
Yeah.
Sometimes you got to
Yeah.
fight with your friends over issues of principle, and particularly if they are immutable principles by which you live and work. Sometimes you have to fight with your friends. So no issue there for me. Let me ask you right quick. I'm watching my clock. I got news, traffic, and sports in about 2 minutes. We'll continue on the other side. But since you mentioned the issue of voting rights and what did not get done, what has not gotten done in the U.S. Senate, and one can certainly blame Joe Manchin and Kirsten Sinema for this not getting done. And yet, I would argue, I would counter that argument by saying the White House, to my mind, still didn't push as hard as they should have, were not as aggressive as they should have been on this, did not consider other ways around this, did not use other issues as leverage to get Manchin and Sinema to move on this issue. I could give a critique of the White House all day long on this issue of voting rights, but my question is, what impact you think the fact that we haven't moved in the Senate to protect voting rights in the way that we should have long ago impacts where we are right now with these assaults, with folks having to go to Georgia State Supreme Court to get the right for early voting? How much of not conquering this issue in the Senate you think impacts our situation presently?
Oh, I think it impacts it hugely. And, not just in Georgia, but we really saw the effects in Georgia. But, I agree with you. I wrote at the time that they weren't doing enough. I remember that when they went to Atlanta to do a speech on voting rights, some of these groups that I'm talking about actually boycotted the speech, not out of disrespect, but out of frustration that, this is too little too late. And everybody knew that not enough had been done. I don't really know. I'm not going to pretend I know the answer to Manchin or Sinema. But when they wouldn't move on the filibuster, Stacey Abrams and other people proposed carve-out, filibuster carve-out. We've got it for tax issues, right? Budget issues. Have a filibuster carve-out for voting rights only, or add that to the 2 or 3 we have already.
Yep.
And they wouldn't go for that. So that's not getting rid of the filibuster. That's just doing the right thing. And I don't know how to conquer that.
Yep. I don't either, but I know they didn't do enough. After news, traffic, and sports, we'll continue our conversation with national affairs correspondent for The Nation and CNN political contributor, Joan Walsh. We'll come back to Georgia just for 1 minute or 2 longer because Joan wrote a provocative piece some days ago that I want to get her to unpack for you and for me. And the piece was titled, "Can Raphael Warnock Win an Even Tougher Runoff Election? Can he win an even tougher runoff election?" Given what she said a moment ago, I wonder what she thinks the answer to that question is, and a great deal more for Joan Walsh when we come forward on KBLA Talk 1580.
We've got a lot to talk about. Good thing we've got 3 hours. More of Tavis Smiley when we come forward.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Mike Moore, and here's the latest from the Black Information Network. The suspect in the mass shooting at a Buffalo, New York supermarket is expected to plead guilty to state charges today. Here's Trey Thomas.
The male teen accused of killing 10 black people in May is due in an Erie County court. Authorities say it was a racially motivated attack. The initial hearing was canceled earlier this month because of recent snowstorms in the area. The suspect is facing a 25-count indictment that includes 10 counts of murder. He's also facing federal charges. I'm Trey Thomas.
A look now at On This Date in History. In 1995, former President Bill Clinton signed a $6 billion road bill that ended the federal 55-mile-per-hour speed limit. And that's the latest. I'm Mike Moore from your 24/7 news source, the Black Information Network and BINnews.com.
Got a vehicle that rolled over in South LA, 110 southbound near Martin Luther King Jr. Looks like that's blocking the express lanes. Right now, the 110 is stop and go from Exposition Boulevard, but they could push back in towards downtown LA. Got an accident in Pico Rivera, 605 southbound from Washington Boulevard. Right now, the 2 left lanes are jammed up, and that's got you messed up starting at Beverly Boulevard. Really heavy drive there. And we got the crash in Ontario, still blocking the fast lane, 15 northbound past the 60. Brake lights start at Limonite Avenue.
Don't let a traffic accident ruin your day. Call 1-800-INFO-FIX to find the nearest Fix Auto location. Their highly trained and certified technicians will have you back on the road in no time. You have a choice on who fixes your vehicle. Tell your insurance agent you want to go to Fix Auto.
Is this the This is the KBLA Sports Minute with Ray Richardson.
The Chargers make a clutch 2-point conversion with 15 seconds left to pull out a 25-24 win at Arizona. 5 straight losses for the Rams. They lose by 16 at Kansas City. USC USC has moved up to 4th in this week's AP College Football Rankings. It's the highest ranking for the 11-1 Trojans since 2016. Undefeated Jackson State, ranked 5th in Division I AA, will play Southern for the SWAC Championship on Saturday, December 3rd. The Clippers get a career-high 31 points and 29 rebounds from Avika Zubac in a 14-point win over Indiana. Zubac's 29 rebounds is the most in an NBA game this season. No debates, no speculation, just the info you need. That's your KBLA Sports Minute. I'm Ray Richardson. This sports report was brought to you by MVP Accident Attorneys. When it comes to your settlement, we're slam dunk. Call 833-MVP-WINS or check their website at themvp.com for a free case review.
When you're the victim of a car accident, hiring the right law firm can be the difference between a rewarding settlement and striking out. Call the pros at MVP Accident Attorneys at 833-MVP-WINS for your free consultation.
Call on me, your MVP.
KBLA Talk 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
Maisha Cairo here for KBLA Talk 1580. We're live in Los Angeles at JP Morgan Chase's Advancing Black Wealth Tour. And I'm speaking to some of the attendees today to see why it was so important for them to be here.
Yeah, this is Lathan and Tyler. Main reason that's very important for me to be here is just to leave a legacy for my kids. Black wealth, generational wealth is what we need in our community, you know. Oh, Chase, someone has to take the lead. They're showing, big business like Chase cares, and they're putting their money where their mouth is at. So it's good to see, big institution like Chase, giving a lifting hand, to the community, and you got to respect that. It makes me want to bank with Chase, and give them another look. If I go to another institution, I actually see what Chase is doing for the community.
That's right, Chase is doing their part to help advance Black wealth. For more money support, tune in every day from 12 to 2 to KBLA Talk 1580's Midday Money Chain, right here.
Congratulations to this week's KBLA Talk 1580's Office of the Week, Community Legal Aid SoCal. Advocates for justice in Orange and Los Angeles counties. Congratulations, Community Legal Aid SoCal.
This year marks 10 years strong of Covered California providing quality, affordable health insurance. Celebrate with us at the Community Wellness Fair on Tuesday, November 29th from 1 to 5 p.m. at Center of Hope Church, located at 9550 Crenshaw Boulevard in Inglewood. Enjoy an afternoon of free health screenings, various community resources, giveaways, and free lunch while supplies last. Enrollers will be on site to answer questions and help with the enrollment process. Covered California is looking forward to celebrating 10 years strong with the community next Tuesday, November 29th. See you there.
Looking for legitimate political discourse without the bear spray? Tune in and speak out. KBLA Talk 1580.
Our guest is Joan Walsh, National Affairs Correspondent for The Nation magazine. Glad to have her on in this hour as we talk politics today in Hour 1. So, Joan, we were talking about this race in Georgia, this race between Warnock and Herschel Walker, where early voting was allowed to commence on Saturday, a couple of days after Thanksgiving. Before I give you a chance to answer the question that that you posed in your own article, can Raphael Warnock win an even tougher runoff election given where we sit today? It's important to recognize the following for those who've not been following every detail of this race. Here's what happened in November, as you heard Joan reference a few moments ago. Every racial demographic, except for white people and white men, voted overwhelmingly for Raphael Warnock in that Senate race, according to exit polls. Let me say that again. Every single racial demographic in the state, except for white people and white men, voted overwhelmingly for Raphael Warnock. Exit polls show that only white voters picked Herschel Walker in the race. That reality is, those facts are very telling. So, Joan, let me stand down and give you a chance to respond to whether or not, given the data I've just shared, whether or not you think Raphael Warnock can, in fact, win an even tougher runoff election.
Well, I think he can win, but to build out what you referenced, Tavis. Yes, Senator Warnock did better with every racial group, but the other racial groups' share of the voting population went down. Even compared to 2018, you can't compare it to a presidential election, right? But you can compare it to 2018. So for it to go down, since 2018. Nobody really expected that. Black turnout went down, Latino turnout went down, Asian turnout went down, other turnout went down. So you have the share of white voters then going up. So that's a real problem. And if we see that again, next week, I think Senator Warnock is in trouble. I am not sure we're going to see it next week for a few reasons. Like I said earlier, I think the infrastructure of community groups is getting built out and is very, very strong, is stronger, let's say, than it was in the general election. That's important. I also think Herschel Walker is hugely unpopular, even with white Republicans. I mean, with all Republicans. I shouldn't single out white people. But I single out white people, for a couple reasons. For one thing, Walker got about 200,000 fewer votes than Governor Brian Kemp, who is not my cup of tea and is, himself a great vote suppressor. But who came off as kind of a moderate, and he did really well. He did better.
He won handily.
He won handily. So without those 200,000 votes, if Walker had gotten them, he would have beat Warnock. He would have gotten the 50%. So it's significant that he didn't get them. And I raised the question: will those 200,000 who didn't turn out are unlikely to? I can't see them turning out in December. The control of the Senate is also off the table because Democrats won Pennsylvania. So, it's not like Republicans have a chance to put Mitch McConnell in charge. I don't see them surging to the polls for a man they didn't like enough to vote for in November, and especially when Senate control is not on the line. I really can't see there being that kind of Republican enthusiasm for him. And I also think, there's probably some racism there too against Walker as a black man. That he's kind of their stereotype. But if they don't have a chance to really exercise power and domination through him, then I think a lot of them will turn their backs. I don't particularly like that. I'm just stating it as a fact of white Georgia Republicanism. That's there too. So I'm feeling pretty good. I wouldn't tell people to stop working or stop giving money or stop biting their nails up until next Tuesday. But there is reason for optimism, and there's actually reason to work hard and get involved if you can.
Yes, I agree with 99% of what you just said. the only thing that concerns me is not even a disagreement, just a concern. I think you're right, and I've said this consistently, that I think that because there is no longer Senate control on the line, I think the turnout across the board is not going to be as high for this runoff election as it was in November. That's my sense across the board. The question, though, is who decides to stay home. If you assume that turnout goes down because Senate control is not on the line, the question is who stays home. And if the wrong people stay home, you got a race and maybe an upset.
I think, yes, that's very true. And, the Warnock coalition has to be the one that tilts the balance. There has to be a reason for them to turn out, and that's the case that he's making. I think that there's also been some criticism of him both in November and less right now. But he to his credit, I would say he has worked pretty well with Republicans. He brags about it a lot. He's made deals with Ted Cruz and Marco Rubio, but that turned off some progressives, some black voters who feel like I don't want to see working with them under any circumstances. They're racist, and so that's a difficult balancing act because he does have a shot in swing counties. He does have a shot with independent voters, and that's important. But I truly think getting people to come out between Thanksgiving and Christmas is really a matter of motivating people who are passionate about you. And so, maybe he can do both. We'll see. It looks like he's trying. He's put a lot of money and another 300 staffers into his ground operation, and he's put them mainly, in majority or heavily black counties and neighborhoods. So that's a good sign too. He's not going for swing voters in, rural counties or rural white counties, excuse me, because rural black voters went for him. But you're right to raise that alarm. If the turnout does not balance that way, if there's lower turnout, but it's white voters who show up, then we have Senator Herschel Walker, and I just can't even stand to say that. So I'm sorry. Those words didn't cross my lips.
Yeah, that didn't sound right coming out of your mouth. So we'll move on from that. But to your point about Raphael, though, and I've known Raphael for years. We've been friends for 25 years or so. And politically, he's a moderate. I love him, but he ain't no progressive. Raphael is not a progressive. He is at best a moderate, and even then, he can't get white voters in Georgia to vote for him. Not to mention, as I said the other day, he's also a preacher in the Bible Belt. You can't get a Baptist preacher on the ballot to pull white voters in the state of Georgia. A preacher, no less, who pastors the church once pastored by the MLK. So if you can't get a black preacher in the Bible Belt who pastors the church that was once pastored by Dr. King and his father, Daddy King, then a brother ain't got a chance in the state of Georgia unless you have the makeup of Herschel Walker. But I digress on that particular point. I saw a piece you wrote the other day, and the headline sort of struck me. And I said on this program last week, I think it was, that what's fascinating for me is if Kevin McCarthy, moving now to the House of Representatives, if Kevin McCarthy ends up becoming the speaker, I think it's the first time in history where you have two speakers from the same state back to back. We would go from Nancy Pelosi out of California to Kevin McCarthy out of California. So for Californians, maybe it's a good thing. I don't know. But your piece was entitled, Kevin McCarthy Will Miss Nancy Pelosi If He Survives. Kevin McCarthy will miss Nancy Pelosi if he survives. For those who were tripped up like I was by that headline, you meant by that what?
I meant that Nancy Pelosi was, Joe Biden called her the most impressive, consequential speaker ever. Not woman speaker, not even of our lifetimes, not one of them, but ever. And one of the reasons was she could count votes, she could whip votes, and she understood the Republican caucus as well as her own. Not as well, I'm sure, but she knew what made them tick, and she knew on certain priorities like raising the debt ceiling and passing budgets and other things. Both Speaker John Boehner and Speaker Paul Ryan had to turn to Nancy Pelosi to get some of their priorities across the finish line. To make her get Democrats to vote for things, and maybe even some Democrats who didn't want to, because otherwise they would fail because they could not control their caucus. So, she came through for them many times. If Kevin McCarthy wants to accomplish anything, he will miss her ability to count votes and also, arm twist and other things to get reluctant Democrats to vote for things that she, holds her nose and wants them to vote for. So, that's what I meant by it. It's also possible Kevin McCarthy doesn't give a darn about accomplishing anything and doesn't care if we default on the debt and doesn't care if we have a funding bill. That's really possible because he's catering to the crazies in his caucus. So it just may be that he wants to see the whole thing go up in flames. And I should add, I don't mean to diminish, who incoming Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries, who is really impressive and outstanding and experienced. But nobody comes into that office having the knowledge that Nancy Pelosi has obtained in her 20 years as Democratic leader, whether as Speaker or Minority Leader in that time. So that's what I meant by that.
No, and I'm glad to see Hakeem ascend to this position as well. For those who've not been following the story, Hakeem Jeffries is a brother, a black man out of New York, out of Brooklyn, and he is going to be the new Minority Leader for the Democrats, the first person of color to lead either party in either chamber of Congress in the history of this country. So Hakeem Jeffries will be the man leading that party. And if Democrats can take back the House, they're only, 6 seats down. If they can take back the House in a couple of years, he obviously would become the first person of color to be Speaker of the House of Representatives in the history of this country. So we move from the first woman Speaker to the first African-American leader of her party, that Democratic Party. So a history being made once again with Hakeem Jeffries set to assume the leadership ranks of his party as Minority Leader in the House. But that means that Nancy Pelosi, as Speaker of the House, and Steny Hoyer, the majority leader, and James Clyburn, the majority whip, are no longer in leadership positions. For those who were around last Wednesday, the day before Thanksgiving, you heard one of my last conversations before we took off for the break was with Minority Whip James Clyburn. He was our guest on this program Wednesday before I stepped out of the studio to enjoy some turkey. And so we talked to him on Wednesday, and I want to come back to that conversation with Joan in a moment because it's significant when you have the leadership that Joan just referenced. It's been around for such a long time. Pelosi steps down. Steny Hoyer steps down. James Clyburn steps down, all at the same time. So now you've got three new people leading the Democratic Party in the House. What does that mean for Democrats, what they can or will or won't get done? A great deal more to talk about with Joan Walsh when we come forward on KBLA Talk 1580.
A safe place to go loud. A great place for progressive politics. KBLA Talk 1580.
KBLA Talk 1580 invites you to join us in celebrating the season of giving by being part of the solution. As we enjoy great food, family, warmth, and well wishes in whatever our festive tradition may be, we share the beauty of the season by reaching out to the less fortunate. Please help us to help others with the KBLA Cover the Houseless Cozy Community Coat and Blanket Drive. All you have to do is drop off new or clean, gently used winter coats and blankets in the KBLA lobby during business hours. Now through December 20th, all of the coats and blankets will be donated to unsheltered individuals and families experiencing houselessness. Simply bring your donation to 4434 Crenshaw Boulevard in Los Angeles, near Vernon Avenue, from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. weekdays. That's 4434 Crenshaw in historic Leimert Park. During the holidays and every day, let's remember, we keep us safe. We keep us warm. We are the safety net, and together we can cover the unsheltered. Get caught up in the spirit of the season, the spirit of love. Make a difference with your friends at KBLA Talk 1580.
When you're young, life is full of choices. Don't let opioids like highly addictive and deadly fentanyl take away your life with just one wrong pill. Addiction is a disease that can affect anyone at any age. But there is a choice to get help for this disease. Find medically proven treatment options, including virtual, at choosemat.org.
KBLA Talk 1580 is pleased to announce a can't-miss community event.
It's a celebration.
Welcome home, Mayor-elect Karen Bass.
Oh my God.
Join us for this free public event as we celebrate Mayor-elect Bass's historic victory. There'll be entertainment, food trucks, and a diverse array of vendors, along with attendance and participation from community leaders, elected officials, celebrities, business owners, and other notables. KBLA Talk 1580 will host Mayor-elect Bass on the main stage as we reflect on the importance of this moment and what it means for the Black community, women, and all Angelenos who believe in the limitless potential of our amazing city. Stay tuned to KBLA Talk 1580 and our social media platforms for all the important details. We look forward to celebrating with Mayor-elect Karen Bass and you.
We gon' celebrate your party with you. Come on now. It's a celebration.
Let's unpack a little bit more with Tavis Smiley. The conversation continues right now.
Joan Walsh, how worried should Democrats be that they are losing Nancy Pelosi, the Speaker, Steny Hoyer, the Majority Leader, James Clyburn, the Majority Whip, all at the same time?
Well, I think it's an opportunity, Tavis. I can see people being worried. I'm a little worried. Let's remember all three of them are staying in the House.
Mm-hmm.
They'll be, quote, backbenchers, but they're not going anywhere, and they'll be around if people want to consult with them. But, you know, first of all, Nancy Pelosi made a promise when she took over as Speaker in 2019 that she would serve 2 terms. I think it's good to keep promises, and I do think it's time. You know, this leadership team will make mistakes. It's not like Pelosi's didn't. They might make more mistakes, but you've got to, at some point, you've got to invest in this new generation, and I think it's time, and I'm excited to see what they'll do.
Mm-hmm. How much more progressive do you think that the Democratic caucus can be? As we all know, you've got the Progressive Caucus, and they've been at odds with Nancy Pelosi on a number of things. The one most famous, of course, is AOC, but there are others, of course, that are part of that squad and beyond. So the question is whether or not you think Democratic policies will be more progressive now that Pelosi and Hoyer and Clyburn are out of the way.
Well, it's kind of a paradox, but the fact that they can't get anything done,
right?
Is in some ways liberates the Progressive Caucus to be more to go its own way more frequently. That might be a bad thing. It might be a good thing. I don't know. I haven't done the final count, and I'm not sure anyone has, including Pramila Jayapal, the chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus. But I've heard reports that it's actually bigger. Because it was a lot of moderates in, purple districts who got knocked off this time. So, they might wind up with more clout, more numbers in the minority. And I think that, that's something we haven't seen. The Progressive Caucus really grew after, more, and it's been growing, but it grew after 2017, 2020, the 2018 election for sure. Which we saw the squad all elected. Squad's grown, so I think they're going to have more power, and it will be interesting to see how Minority Leader Jeffries and others handle that, and whether they let them run free or try to rein them in.
Yeah, we shall see. In our remaining moments with Joan Walsh, I want to circle back very briefly to her book of 2012, a New York Times bestselling book. I love this book. I remember our conversation vividly when the book came out. The book is called What's the Matter with White People? Finding Our Way in the Next America. As I mentioned, that book came out in 2012. And I'm wondering how relevant Joan thinks what she was saying then is today in this America. We'll close with that when we come forward on KBLA Talk 1580.
This is KBLA Talk 1580, where truth prevails. The tricky station is down the dial.
On Saturday, December 3rd, from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m., come out and enjoy a free community health fair, co-sponsored by Pleasant Hill Baptist Church Health Ministry and the Central Neighborhood Health Foundation. The fair will be held on the church grounds at 2009 West Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard, with free health screenings, refreshments, jumpers for the kids, a visit from Santa, entertainment with a DJ, free food giveaway for the first 100 people who attend, as well as raffles and other prizes. There will also be open enrollment, health insurance representatives present. Attendees can get free blood pressure, glucose, HIV and STD testing, a dental screening, fluoride varnish, COVID testing, vaccines and boosters. Flu shots will also be offered. Housing navigation, mental health support, and education services will be available. Don't miss this free community health fair. Tell somebody and receive the gift of preventative health services this season. See you all on Saturday, December 3rd from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. at 2009 West Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard in Los Angeles.
East West Players brings you the stage play Brothers Paranormal by Prince Gomovilas, directed by Jeff Liu, November 17th through December 11th. After a nationwide increase in sightings of Asian-looking ghosts, two Thai brothers, one from Thailand and one from the American Midwest, struggle to launch a ghost hunting business and are called to the home of an African-American couple displaced from Hurricane Katrina. This suspenseful, humorous, compassionate exploration of the trauma of leaving home, whether crossing the country, the globe, or the other side, is a play for everyone. Get tickets now through December 11th at eastwestplayers.org. eastwestplayers.org.
At Cedars-Sinai, we're honored to be named the #1 hospital in California and the #2 hospital in the nation in U.S. News & World Report's Best Hospitals Honor Roll. We're also proud to be named #1 in 6 specialties in Los Angeles. Thank you to our physicians, nurses, academic leaders, and thousands of other team members who bring their best to Cedars-Sinai every day. Learn more about our top-ranked care at cedars-sinai.org.
Conversations that matter. You're listening to Tavis Smiley on KBLA Talk 1580.
Got about 4 minutes left in this conversation, John Walsh, and I want to return to your book of 2012, What's the Matter with White People Finding Our Way in the Next America? As I said, I recall our conversation vividly when that book came out, again, back in 2012. Here we are now in 2022. I'm laughing already, right? How relevant is that? You could put that thing out today and it'd be a bestseller again, given where we are. But tell me how you read then and now.
Well, yeah, I think it was prescient because I talked about how the Republicans had come to rely on, basically a coalition of mainly white people, that, the people who identify themselves as Republican, white people made up about 90% of people who identified as Republican, and that's still true. It might be a little higher. I thought Mitt Romney and Paul Ryan were bad. I was writing about it then. They campaigned with some really nasty anti-welfare rhetoric. But, obviously it got worse. Donald Trump is in the book because I talk about Mitt Romney campaigning to get his endorsement. And, what was Trump famous for in political terms? Being a birther, being a racist birther, insisting Barack Obama was not not eligible to be president. So all of that was prescient. I think the one thing that if I were writing it again, I've thought about, a postscript or a follow-up, sadly, I was too optimistic about, the possibility that if Democrats really met the needs of particularly the white working class, that could make a difference. And it really didn't. Barack Obama's Affordable Care Act affected more white people than anyone else. Barack Obama's bailout of the auto industry affected more white people than anything else. We've seen, white people are not rewarding Joe Biden or Raphael Warnock, for that matter, for, the money that came down with, the COVID Relief Act, the infrastructure bill, the tangible things that Democrats have done for the white working class. The white working class either doesn't know about or doesn't care. So I think, I'm more pessimistic than I was about what needs to be done to get those people to look beyond race and be part of a multiracial coalition. This debate goes on and on and on in the Democratic Party, as you know.
Yeah, you hear Joan's pessimism, and this is from a person who wrote the book back in 2012 about the next America. So my concern is where we are in this new America. Things are certainly different post-Trump than they were in 2012. In this new America, say nothing of the next America, where people of color are about to make up the majority in this country, and that's scaring the bejesus out of a whole lot of people. I digress on that particular point. We will see where this country heads in the coming days, but it was a great book then, and again, as she said, it was prescient, and I enjoyed it then, and just thought about it last night, prepping for our conversation today about where we are in this country right about now. Joan Walsh, National Affairs Correspondent for The Nation magazine. Joan, good to have you back on. As always, we'll do it again. Have a great rest of the day. I appreciate your time.
Thank you so much, Tavis. I'll come back.
We'll do it again. Thank you. Hour 2 of Tavis Smiley after news, traffic, and sports on KBLA Talk 1580.
KBLA 1580 Santa Monica.
I'm Mike Moore, and here's the latest from the